Welcome to another episode of Andy's Chomping at the Bit. Today's episode is being presented completely independent from any business or organizations. Any views expressed during this episode are solely my own personal views. This episode is not meant to further divide an already fractured and increasingly resentful society, but rather approach an area within a growing crisis that so many Americans are divided on. To, at the very least, shape an understanding of certain consequences, and hopefully find some common ground on what is unacceptable behavior. With that being said, today's episode is about some of the tactics being used by immigration and law enforcement officers, as well as the behavior of many individuals within the general public. I'm not trying to debate or sway anyone's opinion or stance on immigration, okay? Nor am I going to endorse or pat either major political party on the back for their handling of immigration. While I'm currently not pleased with the present administration's policies on immigration, I also want to make it clear that the previous administrations didn't do the greatest either, in my mind. The Obama administration's excessive deportation of over 3 million immigrants during his two terms, which a family member reminded me that he had earned the nickname deporter in chief for all of this. That didn't sit well with me either. And the previous administration, the Biden administration's let's replace this policy with a very similar policy, but we'll give it a different name approach to addressing handling and treatment of families detained. That irritated me quite a bit as well. What is bothering me today, enough so that I decided to deviate away from my traditional style of Andy's Chomping at the Bit to publicly address the issue, is the excessively aggressive and unfocused manner people are being targeted, and the fear, uncertainty, and in some cases discrimination has caused legal residents, and even many legal U.S. citizens. In my mind, there's absolutely no excuse for someone to feel entitled to randomly approach a stranger and question their legal status simply because they look foreign, which is a light way of saying you're questioning their status because they look different than what makes you comfortable. This sort of behavior is not okay. I know that the number of individuals doing this is relatively low, but there are a lot of people that are indirectly doing this or creating gossip speculations, which is also not okay. But this sort of behavior, which is pretty clear racial profiling in my eyes, is not necessary. It doesn't make anyone safer. What it does do is cause anxiety for a lot of individuals and their families. It sets a different standard of living between those who look like, say, me, and someone who may have a different ethnic appearance. I spoke in length with a couple of wonderful individuals this week that I have known for quite some time and that I truly love and respect. The one individual was born in another country, but immigrated to the U.S. with his family when he was very young, and has been legally living in the U.S. as a citizen for over 30 years. He shared with me a couple of his traumatic experiences from the past, one dealing with racial profiling, and the other facing excessive force. I want to be clear real quick that I do not oppose law enforcement. The vast majority of law enforcement officers have good intent on properly enforcing the law. And I'd even say the majority of officers make an effort to be fair, though, let's be honest, that's not always successful. However, there are some bad eggs out there as well. Some departments having quite a few more than others that choose to abuse their position of power to harass select groups, just in my mind to compensate for their insecurity or masking low self-esteem. Regardless, the experiences my friends shared were based around these bad eggs. Though both incidents occurred when he was still quite young, one thing had changed quite a bit more recently. The direction and level of anxiety within his thoughts escalated quite a bit. And a very irrational thought had recently crossed his mind as well. Someone who wears his heart on his sleeve and has always had such a resilient attitude. Let's be realistic, guys. We all have limits. If you're listening out there, don't give up, man. Hang in there. There's more people in your corner than you realize. I think what also often gets overlooked in a lot of all this is the dwindling of hope. Hope helps us retain our moral compass. Within hope, our compass, or without hope, I should say, our compass loses its needle. We find ourselves lost and desperate for guidance. And we end up clinging to anything we feel will bring us back to where we once were before we lost hope. In these moments, the very thing that we cling to, whether it's an idea or an individual or even a course of action, never brings us back. Because nothing can return us to a previous point in our lives, regardless of that path. And that's okay. We don't want to go back. That's okay. But what ends up happening from all of this is we justify extreme behaviors and the ideas that we feel will keep us safe and secure, even at the expense of someone else's safety and security. We crush the hope out of others while trying to regain our own self-hope, fueling resentment often from all this. And as history has shown time and time again, at some point in practically every human inhabited corner of the world, it often triggers more extreme behaviors and ideas. Presently, oppression has become one of the far too accepted concepts in our society. If we feel someone has done us wrong or threatens our current way of life, we try to create a punishment of greater severity to strike fear and deter them. And we insist we need to make sure that they understand that we're in charge, that we're superior. Well, except we're not, okay? Let me make this perfectly clear. We are not superior to anyone. We're equal, okay? We coexist. And the idea of oppressing other individuals for our own comfort is inhumane and unjust. The other wonderful individual I got to speak with this week was born in another country as well and adopted by a very loving American couple when she was just a baby. She has spent her entire life since adoption legally living as a U.S. citizen and renounced her birth country citizenship as soon as she was able. She only speaks English and she doesn't have an accent, which surprises way more people than it should. She fortunately hasn't faced the aggressive immigration from strangers like many others have, but she has had to deal with an increased amount of fear, mainly of if or when something will happen to her. A fear of not knowing what would happen, especially considering that she's kind of the person that can't stand confrontation. Or she wonders where she would end up in that scenario. You know, she hasn't even traveled out overseas since she was adopted. So, you know, she shared that these fears have been on her mind quite a bit as of late. But she also shared that they never used to be. There's just much more uncertainty lately. And with the raids now taking place in schools, churches, and places of employment, there really isn't a safe place for so many people to relax and adequately recharge mentally. These tactics and behaviors aren't truly about simply keeping people safe and secure. There are more effective methods of seeking out arresting, and after a fair hearing, deporting immigrants who have committed a crime. What's currently happening is not just targeting illegal immigrants either. Over 185,000 immigrants have been arrested by ICE since October. That's their numbers. Now, not over 185,000 illegal immigrants, over 185,000 immigrants total, legal and illegal. Of those 185,000 plus immigrants arrested, approximately 120,000 of them, once again, their numbers, were found to be innocent, law abiding residents. Now, that's a pretty decent success rate if we're talking baseball batting averages, but we're not. 120,000 immigrants were wrongfully arrested. While I acknowledge that these numbers do overlap with the end of the previous administration, I haven't found any evidence that suggests the ratio of law abiding immigrants arrested by ICE in the recent months has decreased. This behavior, though, these aggressive tactics, the show of force is meant to cause fear and to demand obedience and encourage silence. Whether the intended focus is on illegal immigrants and other immigrants who they suspect have committed crime, or merely it's just a step in trying to establish dominance and control over the opposition, it isn't what I want to focus on right now. I know we could go for a long time debating that and discussing that, but right now I want to focus on the behavior, which I find is unacceptable. If someone shows force or does something to another individual to cause fear, demand obedience, and encourage silence from them, I feel like the vast majority of us can agree that the individual trying to take dominance over the person being abused or being dominated is abusive. I think that's a fair assessment. I believe that the majority of us also, if we witnessed that kind of an incident between two individuals, we would feel incredibly uncomfortable idly standing by watching the incident take place. Here's where I believe things split up quite a bit. And it's also where I intend to focus this episode, and that's to find some common ground and understanding. In this situation, as the observer, I'm pretty sure that the majority of us would say that we would intervene with the abuser in some form or another, whether it be verbally, physically, or even seeking help for the individual being abused. Most of us can agree that being abusive is an unjustifiable act, even if the other individual did something wrong, which in that case, there's still always a better way of handling things in my mind. I'd argue, though, that the majority of people who said that they'd intervene, if actually in that scenario, would likely not intervene. Maybe you have to be somewhere urgent, and intervening would make you late. Maybe the abuser is bigger or more intimidating than you are comfortable confronting. Maybe the abuser is a friend. Maybe you yourself are a victim of abuse. Regardless of your reasoning to justify your decision, you look away, keep walking, and do what you can to forget the moment and feel good about yourself again. This is a much more commonly occurring scenario in your life than you may realize, and it occurs in many various forms. I can truthfully say that though I have usually intervened in the midst of these scenarios, I can vividly recall the moments when I did not. And there were moments where I did not. And I vividly remember right down to the lousy reasoning I had and the moments that immediately followed the action or lack of action. The reality is, doing the next right thing isn't always easy. fact, it's quite hard to do consistently. Aside from the obvious reasoning that we all make mistakes, the challenge of consistently doing the next right thing is realizing that it often is a less comfortable decision, especially compared to some of the alternatives. And sometimes the next right thing conflicts with our own best interests. We may have to step away from our comfort zone, face criticism from others, and in some cases, potentially even some friends and family members. In the scenario of the abuser, we may risk facing retaliation. The choice isn't always clear cut. There's um, a lot of things that could be on the line. Being afraid of losing things that we care about, you know, or concerned about things we care about. For those who claim they don't experience fear, which good luck with that. But that is totally understandable. I get it. I really do. I have to face my fears as well. And I don't always make the right choice. Sometimes I come up short on choosing to do the next right thing. Still, to this day. And I have to live with that and learn from it. And continue to do my best to improve so that I can be a little bit better today, hopefully, than I was yesterday. That's what all this really comes down to. We can have a difference in political views, and we can even hold and prioritize different values. But we can do so without allowing the abuse of others and sacrificing our humanity. So let me float a couple questions for you to ponder. In the moment of an inhumane act, which is worse? The person blindly carrying out the act, or the person observing who knows that what's happening is wrong, but chooses to stay silent? And to go kind of with that question is, do two wrongs truly make a right? An eye for an eye sounds fair, but is it the next right thing? Gandhi wisely once said, an eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind. Let that sink in a little bit here. Well, that's a wrap on today's podcast. I know this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people, and I'm pretty sure that my words have stirred up some strong thoughts and emotions from some of you as well. If you like, feel free to share your thoughts or experiences you may have had within the focus of today's topic. But please keep it civilized if you do that, because threats or verbally aggressive comments will be reported by me. And if I see anything that I feel is inappropriate or disrespectful to not just myself, but even others, I will remove that comment. I do want to leave on a different thought as well. A wise friend once told me, treat everyone with kindness and respect, even if they are a big jerk. Wise words. I love that mantra. But I'm going to modify it slightly today and say, treat everyone with kindness and respect, even if they don't see things the same way you do. Have a great 4th of July, and I'll see you again on Monday, July 7th, for an all-new Daily Biscuit. Take care.